Welcome to Future Stories. Today we're talking missionary stories, and I have a very special guest that I'm very excited to hear from, and his name is John.
That
John,
is
tell
my
us,
name, yes.
yeah, yeah. Tell us where you served, and if you can remember the year, and if you spoke another language. Yeah,
Sure, yeah. So I served in Brazil, São Paulo North, and Portuguese speaking, and that was August of 2008 to 2010.
perfect. Okay, cool. My sister served in Brazil, Sao Paulo as well, and my brother, he served in Manaus. So
Oh, nice. Oh, that's hot up there.
yeah, and you said Sao Paulo North?
That's right.
I'll have to ask her what part. I think it was south. Um,
Yeah, there's five missions I think in São Paulo now.
oh
So
wow.
most of what was my mission is now São Paulo West, I think. So even though I say north, almost all my areas would be areas that are currently in the West mission. So,
Oh wow. Okay, it's changed that much.
oh yeah.
All right, cool. Let's get right into it. Tell me if there's one you want to start with, you can, but if you want to start with a funny story, possibly.
A funny story. Oh, ha, got plenty of those.
Okay.
Um, so like, okay, so I learned a lot about different branches of Christianity in Brazil when I got down there. Like you sort of get the lay of the land. You get to see like what it is that the people tend to believe. A country with a long Catholic history, but recently there's been a huge wave of like evangelical Pentecostalism kind of a thing. I know those aren't like quite the same movements, but still like um lots and lots of these like Pentecostal style churches, and they put a lot of emphasis on like charismatic gifts, like spiritual gifts kind of a thing, like speaking in tongues, that kind of thing. um and the variety that tended to grow a lot in Brazil also tended to be like, how to put this nicely, like anti-intellectual. if,
Okay.
if that works, like that was kind of true of conservative religion generally down in Brazil. Like I had a guy flip out at me once at how evil Darwin was. I'm like, my guy, we're not that church. Maybe that's why he was mad, is he wanted us to be that church. But
Oh,
um, you have like the Igreja Universal, which is led by a guy named Edir Macedo, and then the Igreja Mundial do Poder de Deus, the worldwide church of the power of God. I think they have like one congregation in Korea, which is why they can call themselves that. But headed by a guy who styles himself as Apostolo Valdomiro Rodriguez. Oh, sorry, Valdomiro Santiago, and he uses like sound effects in his services, which is always interesting. So that's kind of the world we're in, and sometimes these people would see us as rivals, and they would try to single us out to try to do like spiritual warfare with us, right? Um, so one day, my companion and I were grocery shopping, and this lady comes up to us. Her name was Maria, which I know because she was the most adorable older lady ever. And she would like talk to herself under her breath when she got nervous. And she was so nervous and scared to be like trying to do spiritual warfare because her pastor had told her, like, you got to find the elders and talk to them. And she was on a mission, and gosh darn it, she was going to do it, even though she was like visibly shaking. And I felt so bad for her. And what was fun about this is that she decided she needed to talk to us in English, but like she didn't speak English. And so she had like cards that had like words that she was like trying to repeat. And I felt so bad. My companion didn't speak English. And it soon became apparent, that her English was really hard as well, like really shaky. And immediately the people like separate from us in the grocery store. And it's like we're in the middle of like a circle, like a fight club or something. And, it's me versus her. And there's my companion off to the side. He disappeared pretty quickly. Um, and it's kind of like a fancy supermarket, a Pão de Açúcar. So like the people in the store were kind of hoity-toity, and critically, a lot of them also spoke English, so they were following along what was happening. Um, and so it's just me and Maria, and poor Maria starts saying that I need to repent, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. But then to tell her, like, in Portuguese, you can speak Portuguese to me. You don't have to speak English. I speak Portuguese. It's fine. Uh, but then she doesn't like seem to hear me, and so she keeps going in her halting, like prepared sermon. And she starts talking about like the Book of Mormon has had all these changes in it. And I'm like, yeah, it's true, but the Bible has had none, she claims. And it's not true. Um, but and she's like talking about that there's different competing churches of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that stem from the succession crisis, like the Strongites and the Hedrikites and the Bickertonite churches. And I'm like, yeah, there was a succession crisis because it wasn't like immediately clear to most of the church who would lead them after Joseph Smith died, but most of the saints were persuaded by Brigham Young's argument about the 12th authority to being equal to the first presidencies per Doctrine and Covenants. I don't remember what it is, but anyway, I wasn't like getting how this was supposed to be an argument against the church and in favor of hers, because like how many different non-Latter-day Saint Christian churches are there? It's kind of like we're kind of in the same boat, I'm afraid. But I didn't say any of this because the poor lady was so sweet and she was so scared, like sitting there talking to me. And she was like visibly shaking and going through her cards and muttering like, oh, Maria, you need to like get organized. I just felt so bad for her. So I was like actually like helping her read her cards to me and like helping her pronounce some of the harder words like Bickerton night. And she seemed genuinely surprised that I'd heard of that one before. Her pastor told her that no Latter-day Saints know the secret history of the church that we've kept hidden from them. And to be fair, I mean, there's a grain of truth that we haven't always been very good about telling our own story. That's why the New Saints books are so good, is because they do such a better job than the old church history books. So I found that encouraging. But anyway, she finally comes to the end of her notes and she gives me pamphlets for her church, which to this day I cherish in my mission scrapbook. And then she turns to leave, saying, like, very haltingly, "You are very impolite." And she walks off and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. And the crowd starts laughing and I hate the crowd. They're annoying. And then
Yeah.
she like gasps and turnarounds and rushes over to me. Oh, no. She says, "I'm sorry. I mean, you are very polite." She was just so cute and so sweet. And even if misguided, like it was a genuine act of faith on her part to do that. That was a scary thing for her. And I hope it was a good missionary moment. Like, I think it would have been a mistake for me to try to like correct her or debate her in that moment. No, it probably would have made a better impact on her, just treat her nicely and from her to see that I wasn't bothered by the information she was presenting me. And like, yeah, and I hope she's doing okay these days. I think we could do with a couple Marias in Relief Society today. That'd be pretty cool. So,
I love that.
but the funny part was how my companion just vanished the instant that happened. So,
Yes.
thanks, Elder.
Yeah. Um, I just love how you word things. Like I tell that to my good friends that aren't members of our church. I'm like, oh, we could use more of you in our church.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Um, and then if you have a favorite story,
Favorites. Okay.
and it could
Well,
be one of your favorite, because obviously I'm sure there's more than one.
oh, there's so many. This will be a good one to test the waters to see um, how cool we are. So
Okay.
because one of the first things they told me when I got to the mission field, like you arrive in the MTC and you're coming from the airport, and I had never seen real poverty before. Like I thought I had, because I grew up in a rural part of California, and I'd seen there were people in the ward who were less fortunate than others, but I had never seen real poverty
Mm.
until I got to Brazil. And we're in the bus, brand new missionaries, fresh off the airplane, and we're going through the outskirts of São Paulo from Guarulhos Airport to get to the MTC, which is in São Paulo there. And we saw like these dirt streets on this hill, and these like it looked like a scene from Lord of the Rings. It was
Okay.
weird. It was jarring. Um, and consequently, we learned a couple things about how like the water in a lot of parts of the city wasn't safe to drink. You
Mm.
needed like a water purifier. But the first thing they said when we got to the MTC, the first lesson we had, elders, they said, elders, it may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but at some point on your mission, you will poop your pants. And no, they were like emphatic, like this will happen. Every single missionary poops their pants at some point. Just accept it. President Hinckley pooped his pants on his mission. You know what
Okay.
happened. So it's mostly to do with the tap water, right? So if you're
Yeah.
careful and you drink it filtered, you're probably going to be okay. But you can't keep unfiltered tap water out of your diet completely the whole time you're there. So as it happens, I did not poop my pants on my mission. So they were wrong, but a lot of other missionaries did. I didn't. But my favorite mission story is about pants pooping,
Okay.
where it was a sunny day. It was a very hot day. Like it gets hot in Manaus, but it's still very, very hot in Sao Paulo. And there's two elders who were not me. And they're walking to an appointment. Abruptly, one of the elders, and it wasn't me, he stops. And he's like, "Well, what's wrong?" asked his companion. And he's like, "Well, elder, I think we need to go home." And so they start heading back home. And they're walking faster, and they get the elder, he's starting to pick up speed. He says, "Elder, I think we need to run." And so they're running. and they're sprinting and there's like sweat pouring off of them. And they finally turn the corner where their apartment is. And then just as suddenly, that same elder, who was not me, he stops running and starts walking. His companion's like, come on, what's up? We got to keep running. And he says, no, elder, we don't have to run anymore. And that is my favorite story from my mission.
Yes.
But it wasn't my story.
Oh, that's so great. Yeah, I have one of those stories. I just thought it was a fart and it wasn't a fart.
Nope.
And then the rest of the way home, I'm just waddling. It was horrible.
Oh no. Well, this one, I had another guy who found out he had hemorrhoids the worst way possible.
Oh no.
Gets up after a long, lunch appointment, stands up, and there's just a pool of blood where he was sitting in the chair.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he got rushed to the hospital. That was no good.
Oh, wow. Oh geez. And then sorry, this let's see. And then we'll get into there's one more before spiritual. Oh, a wild story.
Ooh. Okay. A wild story.
Yeah. Brazil is wild. I mean, oh my goodness.
It's a fun place. There's like a bunch of stories I could mention, but the one that's probably the craziest that wouldn't be like a breach of like confidentiality. Because like, when you're in the office, like you can't, there's some things like you're kind of bound to secrecy for, but this one wasn't one of those. So like, how every mission has like a mission prison kind of.
I don't know if I'm familiar with the one from mine, but
well, see, ours had two. That's how wild we were. There was one which was called Morado do Sol, which kind of sounds nice. It means like the place of the sun, where the sun lives. It was kind of out in the middle of nowhere. That's where you sent people where they do no damage. And then
okay.
But also it was a cool branch, and I liked the area. I didn't go there myself, but I was in the same district as them. And the other was Chora Menino, which is right in the western São Paulo area. It's actually very close to the temple and to the MTC. Chora Menino means cry boy in Portuguese, which is about right, because the house was terrible. It was like really close to the MTC, but it was infamous for being like the worst house in the mission.
Oh, geez.
And over the course of the mission, we began to suspect that it was cursed. Like,
oh, wow.
like literally. Because every 6 months, like clockwork, something really bad happened to the elders living there. So when I first arrived, it happened like immediately, like my first day. It was an elder had broken his leg playing soccer. It's pretty typical. That happens all the time. We have trainings about like don't get too into it, because we're talking Brazil, where like soccer's the national pastime. And like at zone meetings, you'd have, on P days, you'd have like there are bicycle kicks going on. There's like, I think I saw someone do a flip at one point, even though it's not like a normal soccer move. Like,
yeah,
these guys are serious about their soccer. And they just wiped the floors with the American missionaries. It was never particularly good, but he broke his leg. So that's pretty typical. The next one though was really weird. And I don't have time to tell the whole story, I'm afraid. But let's just say there were some bad elders on the mission. And I mean like really bad elders. Like there's the bad elders, and then there's the like ones who might go to prison bad elders.
Oh, wow.
These were like the might go to prison bad elders. And through a fascinating and harrowing set of circumstances that I wish I had time to explain, two of them decided they were going to get revenge on the elder in Chora Menino by beating him up. So my MTC companion was in the house at the time, because there were 4 elders there. And so they're doing their morning study time like they normally do, and there comes a knock at the door. And my former companion doesn't think much of it, just kind of keeps studying, while one of the elders goes to answer the door. He opens the door, and just immediately a fist comes through. The guy's on the ground. One of the bad elders is now on top of him, and just like chaos. Everyone's running around. My companion, like, I think he says he like pins one of them against the wall. The one elder's just getting assailed. The other 2 are like running around trying to figure out what to do, making calls. And then at some point in this scuffle, one of the bad elders, and I swear this is true, grabs a knife from the kitchen. And At this point, the good elders realize that this kind of upgraded from like a little, healthy brawl to like someone might get hurt seriously. So they run out into the street and they leave the other two in the house. The bad elders get left in the house. And one of them like runs up to the gate and shouts after them that they know where their family lives in Rio.
Oh my
And we're just like,
gosh.
so that was the next bad thing that happened. No one got seriously hurt though. Um, the next bad thing was 6 months after that, when an elder caught dengue fever. So, like,
Mm.
you know what dengue is? It's a
My brother was in Manaus, so I think he got it. Yeah, it's just
oh yeah,
because I think you just have a higher chance of getting it like right in the Amazon rainforest because the mosquitoes.
yes. I mean, it's brutal, like in the whole tropical region, but I could especially imagine there because in the city, it's a little. I think it's a little easier to stop because the public health mantra in São Paulo was "Agua parada traz dengue," which is still water brings dengue, and you could generally get rid of
Mm.
the still water, but yeah, in Manaus, I don't think you could get rid of all the still water everywhere because it's like, Manaus, there's water everywhere. Um, but it turns out it's true. Agua parada traz dengue because, there was agua parada in this house and it traz dengue. Um, the elder fell deathly ill. He was like bedridden for weeks, spent a lot of time in the hospital. I was in the office at the time and not with anything important. They had like the assistants who did all the cool assistant stuff. And then they had their companions who took care of their areas when they were doing the assistant stuff. I was one of those guys. Anyway, so I remember before he wasn't like, he was kind of like a bigger guy, like kind of like a bigger guy. And when he got discharged from the hospital, he was a skeleton. Like he needed a walker to get around.
Wow.
It was brutal. Dengue is nothing to sniff at. So that was the third bad thing. And then the fourth bad thing, which I guess came a little early because I was still in my mission at the time. Um, 6 months roughly later, there was an elder who was one transfer behind me, and he got a major pulmonary infection in the house. It was life threatening. He was also hospitalized. He survived, but it was bad. So he and his companion, after he got out of the hospital, they went tracting at a festival that was like in the neighborhood, one of those like community events. And they're just sort of talking to people, and they run into this one like very nice older lady who's like, very happy to be talking to them. And as they're talking, just kind of out of nowhere, she asks, "Are you guys okay?" And they're like, "Yeah. Why do you ask?" And it turns out she's their landlady, which is why she was so happy to talk to them. She owns the Shore Menino house. And she was concerned about them because there's some family history with the house.
Oh
She
no.
kind of made her son mad because he didn't like the idea of missionaries living there, or like he wanted to live there or something, but she rented it to the church. So he was kind of upset. Anyway, she's like, so, he's kind of involved in some like dark stuff. They're like, what are you telling us?
Oh no.
Anyway, so he told me he was going to curse the house or something. So I just want to make sure you guys were doing okay. They're like, yeah, we're doing fine. So immediately they get home and they rededicate the house, obviously. And I don't know what happened after that because I went home like the next transfer. But yeah, like I don't know that I personally believe in stuff like curses on houses or anything like that,
Mm.
but it was a wild set of coincidences.
Yeah.
So that's that story.
Wow. Oh man. If we can transition now to a spiritual story.
Let's redeem this conversation. Yes.
Yeah, if you've got a spiritual story, and then end with your testimony. And you can do it in Portuguese or English, whatever you prefer.
Sure, yeah. So like with spiritual stories, some of them came from the least expected places. Like you would think it would be some like conversion that happened. And mostly that wasn't the case. It mostly came from actually like the really hard, weird moments that I never thought I would be in, like having a companion run away in the middle of the night and being like, so how do I deal with this?
Oh
And like
wow.
having to confront these circumstances and like how do I handle this? They don't have anything about this in the missionary handbook. Preach My Gospel doesn't cover these things. And it was in those moments that I had some of uh, the most spiritual moments on my mission. One of them um was actually with that companion. We all have that companion,
Okay.
Um, and my mental health is really taking a toll. Like I've always experienced depression and been very open about it, and I've gotten help. But this elder, with him, my mental health was at its worst it's ever been in my whole life. Like I put on 50 pounds. I had no motivation to do anything, and I dreaded waking up every morning. And I did everything I could, I thought, to make things work out for us. But we were hampered by two things. One is that I was not a very smart person at the time. Like one of the first things I told us in the MTC, apart from you're going to poop your pants, is you're young and you're dumb and you don't know it yet. And that turned out to be very true. I thought I knew how to like help him and help us. I'm like, I can make this work. And it turned out at the end, he didn't need the help I had to offer him. He needed a different kind of help that I couldn't give him. And I didn't know that. And I was getting frustrated and he was getting frustrated with me. So we didn't know how to work through our problems. Anyway, when transfers came and he didn't get transferred or I didn't get transferred, like I couldn't speak for the rest of the day. I'm getting like tense just talking about it. Anyway, so these things,
I'm sorry. It's like PTSD.
it is like sit here and like, ooh. Anyway, so we had mission president interviews. You do, once a transfer, and the mission president's wife is a freaking angel because she sensed something was off, and this and that happened. My companion blew up at me and like tried to get me to like fight him, like fist fight him right there in the chapel. And I'm like, no, I wouldn't bite, but he kept coaxing me. And finally, she steps in and she's like, okay, you're not going home with him. Like, oh, thank goodness. It was like Christmas came early. And when I finally got to the next P day and I was able to like unload for real with my family, because, you try to like keep these things from me. You don't want to like worry your family and be like, hey guys, everything's terrible. You try to put the best face on it. Um, Immediately I get a reply from my mom because we couldn't talk live back then, right? I had to email. And she says, so I definitely knew something was happening because I was getting these very strong, protective, mama bear impressions. And I knew you were struggling with something really big. So I prayed that you would be able to get out of it. And I believe to this day that it was her prayers that led the mission president's wife to listen to those, motherly instincts she had, that something was definitely off. Um, and I think it was the best thing for both of our mental health. Um, and it was a huge testament to me of the reality of like the bond between families. One of my favorite sermons by Joseph Smith is he's talking about, I think it was Joseph Smith talking about the sealing power, where he says, even if your children should like fall away, he says the tentacles of the spirit, and I love that word, will like bring them back to you basically. And that was sort of to me a big testament to that bond. So
Wow. Yeah, and if you want to end on your testimony.
yeah. And I'll go ahead and do it in English, because mesmo que eu lembro falar português mais ou menos, I feel like it would be more an exercise in like seeing if I could still pronounce the words, and I might like lose my focus a little bit.
Oh,
But
I see. Yeah.
I feel like I've got it down grammatically, but I'd be too self-conscious about my language. So it might be a little atypical because I think that there's a lot that we have yet to do to grow as a church and as how we conceive of missions and missionary work. But it was a great testament to me just being out there in an area where the church was new in some areas. It's pretty old in areas like São Paulo, but to see how the way the church is organized allows it to thrive in any environment. And that, excuse me for a second. That the Lord is mindful of the circumstances that people are in. Even when we're not, because I was not. Like I said, I'd never seen real poverty before my mission, but reading the scriptures after my mission and seeing what was really going on in the world was really eye-opening to me. And I was like, oh, Christ really knew what he was talking about when he talks about like unto the meek, the meek will inherit the earth. And where you go into an area where the people have never heard of the church before, and the way it's set up, they don't need to wait for like a priest to be transferred in. We can ordain priests right there among them, and that the people of the area themselves can govern themselves and not need to have dictated to them from Salt Lake City. Like we give them guides, we help them, but we help them establish Zion themselves. And I think that was the huge testament to me, is that the restoration is very real. And even though it's led by imperfect elders who sometimes get into knife fights, um, nonetheless, the mantle of priesthood authority and the reality of revelation and inspiration, the number of times that literally saved lives in the mission, is just incredible to me. So there's my testimony.
Amen.